Welcome. It's the Matic. It's the illest blurred in the land. Welcome back to Ill Blur. Matic was going to say so much for commenting, liking, subscribing, and returning. Let's get into today's new video. Woo-wee! I know it's been a minute, but let's talk about it right now. Ahsoka episode 5 Shadow Warrior. Woo! Okay, so this episode starts off very interesting. We see the planet that Ahsoka, Sabine Wren were on, and it looks pretty completely empty now. And we see General Hera arrive on the actual planet and land. And when she gets there, her friends are already have been gone. Wow. We see that General Hera is a little uncertain about this planet because she goes near the ruins, and who is there? Huwain, the Jedi droid, pretty much, and we see Huwain basically having regrets about Sabine Wren and also ahsokatano. And he's like, I told them to stay together. He kind of has some regrets, some doubt on what took place on this planet. And you can understand that he cares about both of them and their well-being. The next part of this episode, I actually thought was really interesting. Definitely good to see Hayden back as this character. We are introduced to Anakin Skywalker again. And this is very interesting with Anakin because, Anakin's been in another Star Wars series too. That's what I said again, not like he's been in the series already. But Anakin, and we see Anakin telling Ahsoka, like, you're a failure. You can even take on Baylan. You lost to this Jedi turned Sith, and you thinking that you a Jedi master type of thing. And we see Anakin pull out the lightsaber. We see Ahsoka pull out her lightsabers, and they duel for quite a bit. And Anakin outmaneuvers her somehow and cuts this bridge that they're on, like in some type of spiritual plane. And she's back as a kid. Wow. But let's get back into what else is happening in this episode. Also, who's on this planet with General Hera is her son Jason and her droid Chopper. And we see Jason saying that someone's still here on this planet. You know what I'm saying? And his mother is kind of like in denial about it. She's like, what are you talking about, Jason? And Jason's right. Someone else is here on this planet, and it is exactly Ahsoka. And what I like about this episode, is pretty much with Ahsoka, we learn about her past. What took place for her to leave Anakin Skywalker, meaning abandoning her actual master. So we see pretty much once he cuts the bridge off, she's a younger Ahsoka. They're in the Clone Wars, so this does take place in the Clone Wars era of Star Wars, and there is a war going on. And we see Ahsoka kind of shell-shocked because she's a kid. She doesn't know that there are casualties in war, and Anakin lets her know, like, in war, there will be casualties. Lives will be lost. And for her to see that at such a young age, that is very scary. You know what I'm saying? Just imagine you seeing this and your master's like, oh, everything's fine. This is just a part of war. She's still a child. She's not an adult. So she can't necessarily understand why this takes place with war. We see her come across one of the soldiers and she touches his hand. And I love how Anakin is a bit blunt for her master, or rash, as some people would say it. But she needs to understand this is her duty as a Jedi. They are the ones that lead when it comes to war. Very interesting dynamic that they added to this episode. Also, while Ahsoka is still training, we see General Hera and Huwain go scout this planet again to make sure that her son is not lying, because she's not for sure what her son is talking about. She's like, what is my son talking about? Like, ain't nobody else on this planet but Wayne, us, and then my other actual pilot. You know what I'm saying? Because the other pilot came with her as well. And we see that is also something that's interesting. Now, what I like about this episode that I felt like, this kind of stood out a bit. This gave character development to Ahsoka. We see a much braver Ahsoka, her leading the war like Anakin had anticipated, but also we see that it foreshadowed that Anakin is the Shadow Warrior. Realistically, when you think about it, you're like, oh, he the Shadow Warrior. Because when Ahsoka sees him, she sees Darth Vader. She sees the darkness within Anakin. This is why they call it the Shadow Warrior. And we see them eventually go back to that actual plane of existence that they were once in, and we see them duel again, and Anakin pulling out the red lightsaber. He's got the scar over his eye, and he looks like a Sith. And we see them duke it out, and Ahsoka wanting to go back to the land of the living because she's like in this spiritual afterlife, I guess. And Anakin is pretty much the Shadow Warrior that's trying to help her become the actual Jedi Master that she needs to be. I thought that was well executed, that Anakin was the one that actually got her back into training and everything. And then eventually Ahsoka completes the training. We see the place that she was in submerged in water, her pretty much completing the training, and pretty much Jason was right. They come across Ahsoka, General Hera and them again, and pretty much Jason tells Ahsoka, I knew you were still here. I heard you, battling and stuff. And his mother kind of distracts him with Huang, the Jedi droid. I thought that was a really cool concept. She's like, look, I don't want him to get too much personal with what took place under this water. But she literally did that. Now, the next day, we see Huang pretty much telling Ahsoka that this has only happened in one day. And he also wonders, where is Sabine Wren? We found where you are at, but we have not seen Sabine Wren. And I like that Ahsoka is pretty much force sensitive, where she's able to go back to places to pick up. They have something to deal with a memory imprint to find out what happens to Sabine Wren. Because Sabine Wren just didn't leave the planet without leaving a clue. Because Sabine Wren is that type of character. She's gonna leave a clue on what has happened to her. And we see Ahsoka feeling for the environment and hearing the voices and everything. And she realizes that Sabine Wren has been held captive by Baylan and Shin Hati. Now, the last part of this episode I thought was interesting. We see General Hera get in trouble for some of the things she's done, being rebellious, for being a general. Pretty much the council can't keep lying, not knowing where she is. And we see Ahsoka taking a different path to find out where Sabine Wren is. They come across these space whales, and pretty much she's convinced that if we're gonna find out where Sabine Wren is, we are going to have to take the ride on this whale. And an unlikely ride at that. I gotta be realistic. Unlikely ride. She decides to literally get inside the whale's mouth. And, before she does that, literally, Huang is like, are you sure about this? Like, she's like, I'm not really for sure, but I'm going to really go along with this to figure out where my student is. And we see her go inside the whale's mouth, and pretty much her trusting the animal that's going to take her across the galaxy. So, before she leaves, she says her farewell to her friend General Hera, and she's off to another part of the galaxy. Honestly, this was definitely an interesting episode. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. David Filoni is pretty much the unofficial George Lucas protege that we never asked for. Very interesting episode. Like that they completed Ahsoka's training. Now she's a master and no longer a Padawan. Overall, this show gets better each episode. There's no denying it. I was like, oh, this is getting better. But this is your boy Blur Man, guys. You tell me in the comments, have you seen the Shadow Warrior episode of Ahsoka episode 5, guys? It's a Blur Living World.